Okay, so we've talked mostly about the process of metabolizing sugars, but we also have other things in our bodies that need to be metabolized. So, specifically, we're going to be talking about the oxidation of fatty acids or how we metabolize fatty acids. So, beta oxidation of fatty acids. So, in stage two of fatty acid or fat metabolism, fatty acids, so we break down our triacyl glycerols into our fatty acids and the glycerols. The fatty acid that's produced there undergoes beta oxidation, which removes two carbon segments from the carbonyl end. So at this position, so 2 carbons away, we call that the beta position. So 1 carbon away from the carbonyl is alpha, 2 carbons away is called beta. If you keep going, gamma, delta, blah, da, da, da. So 2 carbons away from the carbonyl is the beta position, and we oxidize this. I don't need that part. We oxidize this position here. So each cycle in oxidation produces acetyl-CoA. So we oxidize there, and then eventually it's going to chop and break off. Now we have these 2 carbons. So that's an acetyl-CoA is going to be formed, and then that can undergo citric acid cycle, just like we've talked about in the other parts. So the stages to beta oxidation of fatty acids is a 4-step cycle. So first is fatty acid activation. So fatty acid activation prepares the fatty acid for transport through the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So it combines a fatty acid with coenzyme A to yield fatty acyl CoA. And it requires energy obtained from hydrolysis of ATP to get, long story short, you have to put 2 ATP into this to get the process started. So fatty acid activation costs 2 ATP. You got to initiate with 2. So really what this looks like is we have our fatty acid, so however long it's going to be, put in ATP and a CoA enzyme, and we're going to make this bond here. We're going to, so we're removing one of those oxygens. So that's where we get water on the end here. It's covered up water from those oxygens. And we're going to form AMP and 2 phosphates. So in this particular case, you can either do 2 ATP and form 2 ADPs. We need 2 here. But in this particular case, you actually form AMP. So monophosphate. You take 2 of the phosphates from the same ATP. Okay, so let's look at this process more in detail. So reaction 1 is an oxidation reaction. So it could also be, remember, you can think of that as a dehydrogenation reaction. So hydrogen atoms are removed by FAD from an alpha and beta carbons to form a double bond. So here we're going to zoom in. Sorry, we're going to have to go zoom in and out. There's a lot on this slide. The alpha and beta carbons here, these hydrogens, 2 of them are going to be removed in an oxidation reaction. So we form a double bond here in between the alpha and beta. Step number 2 is called a hydration reaction. So we know what these are back from chapter 12. That double bond, we're going to add an OH across the double bond, and the oxygen is going to go on the beta carbon. So that double bond now has an oxygen at the beta carbon. Okay. Then reaction number 3 is another oxidation reaction. The OH on the beta carbon is oxidized by NAD+. So we had FAD in the first step, but now we have NAD+ in the second step, or in the third step, forming a beta ketone and NADH plus H+. Okay, so this hydroxide is now going to be oxidized up to the ketone, alcohol to a ketone. And again, those hydrogens are going to go to that coenzyme. Same deal as we've seen previously. And step number 4 is going to be, it's called cleavage. So the alpha beta bond, let's switch to a new color. The alpha beta bond, this bond here, is going to be what's cleaved. We're going to chop that apart. Okay. This would then form acetyl-CoA. So we have the alpha carbon all the way through CoA is going to form acetyl-CoA, and then a new molecule of CoA is going to come in and attach to the beta carbon. The acetyl-CoA produced from the fatty acid can then enter the citric acid cycle. So this overall shortens our fatty acid by 2 carbons. So this is a process. You oxidize the beta position and then cleave between the alpha and beta and make a new fatty acyl CoA. Okay, so then you make acetyl-CoA. That goes into the citric acid cycle. Now, so let's say you started with 10 carbons. Now you're at 8. If you do the whole process, the 4-step process again, then you get down to 6, 4, and then 2. And then at that point, you have your 2 acetyl-CoAs that can both go into the process of the citric acid cycle. So each acetyl-CoA undergoes the citric acid cycle and produces 10 ATP, if I remember correctly. Yep. So we'll get 10 ATP out of each acetyl-CoA produced in this process. So learning check, match the reactions of the beta oxidation with each of the following. So water is added. Where is water added into our in our process? Is it going to be the oxidation, hydration, oxidation number 2, or fatty acyl-CoA cleavage? So water is added during our hydration reaction. Let's go ahead and just number these. This is reaction 1. This is reaction 2, 3, and 4. So water is added during reaction number 2, our hydration. FADH2 forms. So let's go back and look at our process here. FAD is the coenzyme in the first oxidation. So it's going to be step number 1. A 2-carbon unit is removed. That's going to be in our cleavage. That's how we get rid of 2 carbons. So step number 4, our last one. A hydroxyl group is oxidized. So that is going to be one of our oxidations. So let's go back and look. Our first oxidation is actually to make a carbon-carbon double bond, right? So that's actually going to be the second oxidation, or step number 3. And then our last one is going to be NADH forms. So let's look again. NADH is the coenzyme associated with oxidation 2. So that's step number 3 again.